Good morning, members. It is now 8 o'clock, the 1st of February 2022. My name is Regan Allen, Chairperson Community Safety in the Western Cape Provincial Parliament for the Standing Committee. I wish to welcome all members, the Acting Minister, Minister Anru Mare, HOD Advocate Yashina Pillay and her team, Mr. George, the CEO of the Western Cape Liquor Authority and his team, the Parliamentary Monitoring Group, the media and all other guests. I will allow for brief introductions from the members of the committee for the record.
Morning, Chairperson and others. Phil and Christians, thank you.
Good morning, Chair. Lorraine Botha, permanent member for the Standing Committee, Community Safety.
Good morning, Chairperson. Wendy Kaiser-Philanda, alternate member.
Good morning, Chair. Mesuli Kama, member of the committee.
Thank you so much, members. In terms of the context for today, we are here to discuss the 2020-2021 annual report for the Department of Community Safety, as well as the Western Cape Liquor Authority. Members, you would be aware that this discussion is taking place today due to a dispute that was lodged, and we were unable to finalize the committee meeting as the program for December 2021 already passed after the dispute was finalized. So we are here today to discuss the annual report for the department as well as the Liquor Authority based on the dispute that was lodged. Given the first meeting for our year 2022, allow me to state the proceedings today. It will be, like we all know, via MS Teams, and I will refer to the ATC that was published in April 2020. Members, I will allow for the minister, for the acting minister, and the HOD to make brief comments and also introduce the teams that are with them. Do I see member Minister Anru Mare? Wasim, our procedural officer.
Good morning, Chair and everyone. Let me just check in with the minister's backroom staff to check if she maybe has some logging in problems.
No, thank you so much.
With the rest.
Given that, please allow me to set the context, members. In terms of the way forward, I have received a request from members of the Standing Committee. There has been a number of media-related articles that had a direct impact on the Department of Community Safety. I do want to echo following my letter that I've dispatched to each and every member of the Standing Committee, and following the Premier's public media statement yesterday. We are in the process of setting a committee meeting for the Premier to brief the committee on the suspension of the minister, and that date will be confirmed as soon as possible. I trust that members will understand that due to the report that the initial once the initial report has been tabled to the Premier, that date will be confirmed as soon as possible. Seeing that this is an annual report and it covers for the period of 2020-21, I will, with all humbleness, request that we follow due process in terms of interrogating the annual report here before us today, so that we are able to exercise effective oversight. Wasim, do we have any indication as yet?
The minister is in, Chair.
Yes, sure.
Thank you so much. Just before I hand over to the minister, Member Kama, I see your hands up.
Thank you very much, Chair, and greetings to you. I think good to see you this year, and wish you all the best in the committee as well. Chair, I just want a small clarity on what you had just indicated. Are you saying that we will only be able to convene a committee when the Premier has received the initial report from the investigator? Are you saying that is only then that we're going to be able to get the report? And the question that then I have, Chair, is really around. Does it really have to wait for the report for us to be told as to what are these allegations? Firstly, there were serious allegations, and now the Premier, I think in the statement you are referring to, speaks about sexual misconduct. So I think the allegations part is there no way that we can be able, as members in the committee, to be at least made aware as to what are the allegations, and of course, without revealing the identity of the complainants, but just to get a sense of what are these allegations, because, Chair, that would assist us also in exercising our oversight over the department, even in the case of this report, because I can say even now that there are some concerns that I have and questions that I would have, which would emanate from this particular report that we're going to discuss, in the interest of ensuring accountability. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Member Kama. I hear what you are saying. What we will undertake is that the Premier highlighted in his media statement the nature of the allegations. That's in the public domain at the moment. So that because that is in the public domain already, there's a process that the Premier also undertook in terms of what he did in terms of his role when the allegations were presented to him. I think as a committee, it will be important for us to interrogate that process and to engage the Premier in that regard. And the opportune time would ultimately be once the initial report has been tabled by the independent investigator. And the Premier indicated it should be within the next 2 weeks. And if I consider the steps taken as per media statements from the Premier's department, there has been swift action, but we would obviously want to interrogate that swift action so that we can ultimately hold the executive accountable in that regard. But what I will say is that as soon as we are done with our AR today, we will discuss committee business moving forward so that we can come up with a way forward in that regard. I trust that that is okay, your side.
Yes, that's okay, Chair.
Thank you so much. I totally hear where you are coming from. As members of this committee, we have always taken our oversight role extremely serious, because we know there's a role that we have to play, a role that the department has to play. So I am delighted that all our members are back. Member Christians, Member Botha, Member Bosman, and Member Kama as our permanent members here. We have alternate members that is joining us as well. So may we have an amazing year moving forward as we continue to work together in fostering relationships with all stakeholders as we hold them accountable and exercise our oversight. On that note, I will allow the Minister to make some brief introductory remarks, and thereafter for the HOD to make some introductory remarks and to also introduce the team that is with her today. We will first, in terms of the process, undertake the Western Cape Liquor Authority, and I will allow Mr. George to make some opening remarks and introduce his team as well. Directly after we have concluded with the Liquor Authority, we will then proceed with the department. So members, thank you so much. I trust that each and everyone feels welcome. Minister Anrumare, baie dankie dat u hier is. We are delighted. I give over to you.
Thank you, Chairperson. My apologies for being delayed. I've struggled to get into. So if I've got it right, you want me first to do the introductory remarks before we introduce the department.
That's a-okay, Minister. The HOD will ultimately make her remarks, and prior to her remarks, she will mention the colleagues that is with her.
Okay, thank you so much. So good morning to everyone. I must say it was a hectic week, and it's a privilege for me to be the acting minister. And as the acting minister of community safety, I has met with the department's senior management team and was briefed on the status of the safety programs across the province. To ensure the stability and continuity of these programs, I will actively be involved in meeting the imperatives of the provincial safety plan in the interim, as I said, as the acting minister. As safety is a key priority of the Western Cape government, I'm honoured to have been entrusted with this significant role to ensure the continuity of the pivotal programs of the Department of Community Safety. The lack of safety in our communities is one of the foremost challenges we face. While at the provincial level, we do not have control over the police, this department has played an instrumental role in improving safety for our residents. I look forward to providing the needed support to HOD Yasina Pillay and the wonderful team to further promote professional policing through effective oversight as legislated and to capacitate safety partnerships with communities and other stakeholders. Both myself and HOD Pillay have adopted an open door policy for any staff member that may require their support or our support or advice in confidence. And I trust that we will be professional in today's deliberations. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you so much, Minister Marais. HOD, I note you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair and members. If I could introduce the team first, and then I will then make some opening remarks as well. So I am joined by our senior management team in the department, the Chief Director Management Support, Lindy Govender, the Chief Director Secretariat for Safety and Security, David Kutsia, the Acting Chief Director for Security Risk Management, Fred Watkins, the Director Policy and Research, Amanda Dissel, the Acting Director the Acting Director for Monitoring and Evaluation, Mr. Wayne Butler, the Director for sorry, Chair, we've had some changes, apology. The Director who's been newly appointed as of today, Mr. Beki Simalane, for the Director Monitoring and Evaluation, and then Mr. Wayne Butler was acting as Director Monitoring and Evaluation. He's now our Acting Director Safety Promotion and Partnerships, our Director Community Police Relations, Hanmarie Marshall. I'm joined by the Acting Director Strategic Services and Communication, Noran Golan, Mr. Johan Brandt, who works both with ourselves as well as the EDP, joined by Ms. Julian Lutz, who is the Director Provincial Security Provisioning, and then the Acting Director Anthea Michaels, who is the Acting Director for Security Advisory Services, and then also joined by our Acting Head of Ministry, Ms. Stacey McLean as well. Chairperson, I trust that I have covered all the SMS team members. So once again, good morning to yourself as well as the members, Minister and colleagues. The Department of Community Safety has done very well, in my humble opinion, during the previous year. We have continued on our journey to achieve our vision to meet the deliverables of the Western Cape Safety Plan, as well as to be more service delivery orientated in our operations beyond police oversight. We have established area-based teams in priority areas within the Western Cape province, with a focus on areas with the highest rate of murder, as well as 5 areas within the district municipal space as well, where we will bring together law enforcement, violence prevention, and urban design interventions. Finally, Honourable Chair, we are proud of our 13th consecutive clean audit outcome, where we are displaying that we can have increased service delivery, but also a clean audit outcome at the same time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, HOD, for your opening remarks. Minister, baie dankie vir u se opening remarks in die verband. Members, we are going to dig into the annual reports for the Department of Community Safety, but prior to Community Safety, we will deal with the Western Cape Liquor Authority. Member Christians, I see your hand.
Chair, yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to know that we have just heard from the HOD and the acting minister. Are we going to leave the questions that just on the opening remarks to later, or do we ask them now?
What we will do in terms of your questions, I will encourage members to jot down the questions and we will take it with the forwards in terms of the department. Would you be okay with that process, Member Christians?
No problem, Chair. Your direction.
Much appreciated. Members, we will dig deep into our annual reports. I will now note Mr. George, the CEO of the Liquor Authority, to make some opening remarks and to indicate the team that is with him here today. And thereafter, we will do section by section or part by part in terms of our interrogation and discussion around the Liquor Authority. Mr. George, I see you, sir. Mr. Wasim Matthews, are we able to double check if Mr. George is logged in?
Chairperson, I don't see him on the list. Is there perhaps someone else from the authority that can account?
HOD, am I able to bring you in terms of the Liquor Authority? I see the chairperson is with us here today. Mr. Kingwell, is there any remarks from your side, sir? Always good seeing you, and I trust that you had a good year so far.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members of the committee. Yes, I've been trying to track Simeon this morning and don't seem to be getting a response. They've got their diary saying 8:30, so they'll join us at 8:30. That's my response I've just received, so I'm not sure where that miscommunication came in. So, Chair, if I can just start off, so not to delay the process, with the introduction to the 2021 annual report. And it's really, again, a reminder to this standing committee, and my apologies if you are aware of this, but the Liquor Board is actually the accounting officer to the Liquor Authority. And as such, we are accountable to report to you. As much as we are very dependent on our parent department for that guidance and that leadership, we still have that accountability per our act and per our requirements. So I'm very glad that we have this opportunity and that we always welcome the open and frank questioning that these committees do provide for good governance. The challenge for the year under review has been enormous, but more particularly, it has been an opportunity that through the funding opportunity provided by the department, that we have been able to embark on some very key initiatives that support the alcohol harms reduction program. So I think that in terms of supporting the Western Cape government's VIP initiatives, that this exercise and this investment that has been put in the hands of the Liquor Authority has shown good results for the first year, and the detail of that will obviously be shared by the team when they join us. Hopefully they're joining us now at the moment. So, Chair, that goes without saying, is that we are very dependent on the support from our parent department, the Department of Community Safety, and I just want to thank the acting minister for taking on that role under difficult circumstances, for the HOD, for the leadership that she's given over the year. And we've had a very open and very frank relationship that allows the Liquor Authority to move forward under their guidance, and also the team that supports the HOD. Chair, I don't know if there are any other opening questions I can add to at this stage, other than perhaps just to wrap up to say this liquor board has been very privileged to have a very stable, strong and very competent management team in the Liquor Authority. And that reflects in the annual report, that reflects in the clean audits that we have had, again for another year. And I want to congratulate the team for that, because it certainly was under very trying circumstances. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that opportunity, and I'm happy to take any questions if there are at this stage. Hopefully the team has joined us.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kingwell. I have engaged our procedural officer, Mr. Matthews, who is in the process of calling in Mr. George. We have made contact and he is about to log in. There has been some technical difficulties as well. Members, if we can give him 2 minutes before we proceed.
Chair, just to report back, if I may, the link is not working at the moment with Mr. George, but apparently you are trying to call him in.
Thank you so much. We are our very first meeting for the year, and technology is showing us that
Perhaps, Chair, with the heat waves, all these technology connections have melted under the circumstances, and we're all stressing even the technology.
But members, we are delighted that we are able to have a full house here today, and we are able to interrogate the annual reports. HOD, if I can just double check with you in terms of me tabling the various parts, would we be able to continue in the absence of the CEO if there's any alternate member of the senior management team that would be able to cover any and all questions that members may have?
Honourable Chair, will you be tabling the Liquor Authority's report first?
Yes, I wanted us to do it that way, just in case we don't have enough time at the end. Oh, I see Mr. George is arriving. I am admitting him.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. George, I trust that you are well and that you can see me and that you can hear me.
Yes, I can. Absolutely. Thank you, Chair, and apologies for the challenge connecting. We didn't seem to get the link originally. Thank you so much for accommodating me.
Thank you so much that you are here. Mr. George, we have received opening remarks from Mr. Kingwell. I will now allow for opening remarks from you before I table the various parts to the annual report and allow members to ask questions of clarity, any detail or additional detail, etc., and then we will take it from there. Is that in order your side?
Thank you very much, Chairperson.
And if you can introduce any of your team that is with you.
Okay. Chairperson, thank you very much for the opportunity. Yes, my team would be also the CFO. That will be, I'm not sure if he's online or he had the same problem, but certainly he's joining as well. And then Mr. Kingwell, I trust, has already from the board side introduced himself, as you indicated. Chairperson, may allow me then basically a few introductory remarks. I must say that when I commenced service with the Western Cape Liquor Authority in 2021, it was the end basically of that financial year for which we are now in your midst. As the report has indicated, it was the first year in which we experienced the pandemic. So we were all, like all other institutions within government, looking at how to adjust and adapt. I think what was key to accept and understand under the circumstances is that in this process, I mean, that the disruption required us to revisit some of our indicators. It seemed after that essentially going forward as an organization, increasingly we will be required to be actually much more responsive going forward. It is very important that we develop from those learnings. But as far as that financial year is concerned, I'm pleased to report that one, we had a clean audit for the year under consideration, but more importantly, we understood and our role and could play a meaningful role in relation to COVID as far as our activities are concerned as well. And I think our contribution there was meaningful. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Mr. George. Your presence here is highly appreciated. Members, on that note, the annual report for the Liquor Authority has been duly distributed. I trust that members have had opportunity to peruse and make notes, etc. I will now table part A, which is pages 6 to 15. But is there any question for that entire 16 to 15 and based on the opening remarks made by Mr. George? I will take a round of hands. I see one hand so far. Member Kama, you may proceed.
Thank you very much, Chair. And likewise, let me also welcome the Chair and CEO from the Liquor Authority. My questions, Chair, I think the first one is on the forward by the Chairperson on page 8, paragraph 2. Where it talks about that during the period under review, the Western Cape Liquor Authority continued its focus on the implementation of the alcohol harms reduction initiatives. There, Chair, I just want the clarity if we can get the details of these initiatives that were implemented and in which areas were they implemented. My next question is on page 9, paragraph 3, on the last sentence, where it talks about that the Western Cape Liquor Authority has aligned its operations to support the alcohol harms reduction. I just want to get there, Chair, an update or perhaps a position of the authority on the necessity to push for the alcohol harms reduction white paper to be passed into law, and perhaps get the relevant details and engagements that have been held with the provincial government in this regard. The other question that I have, Chair, on paragraph 5, same page, on the collaborative interventions with the Western Cape government and related agencies. There's that paragraph there. So I just want to get a sense there of how many of these interventions were in the affluent areas, in the well-established pubs, or did we have any of these interventions in such areas? And the last question, Chair, that I have is on the second last paragraph, the last sentence. I think that paragraph there, it's explaining, because the department did not use all its, I mean the entity did not use all its funds, and there they say these funds largely relate to the additional enforcement capacity, and a rollover will be requested. Can we just get a sense as to why were the funds not spent? Thank you very much, Chair.
Chairperson?
Oh, I was on mute. Thank you so much, Member Kama. I see no other hands at this stage. Mr. George, if I can just latch onto one of the questions that Member Kama posed, and I know that we have received information via the differentiated pricing model. Are you able to give us a status update in that regard? The implementation of the legislative process, how far that is, and any additional feedback with regard to stakeholders engaging the Liquor Authority around the differentiated pricing model? Members, no other questions on Part A at this stage? I will hand over back to Mr. George.
Chairperson, thank you very much. I will take the liberty maybe to respond to some of the operational questions that relate to the chairperson's forward, with his permission, of course. And maybe just say that I think essentially what we need to understand about the alcohol harms reduction policy white paper, it basically looked as and developed a strategic imperative that informs how we should be approaching alcohol and the regulation of alcohol. So that specifically is the area of focus of the Western Cape Liquor Authority. So there's a number of interventions that we embark upon to support exactly those outcomes as alcohol harms reduction as guided. Bear in mind that the alcohol harms reduction white paper is basically compiled after having considered all the relevant research and documentation that is largely contained within the World Health Organization's reports on the impact of alcohol generally, globally within the world context. I think that is the first point that I would like to register. In terms of the white paper, in as far as it relates to us, we have to become increasingly more effective as the Western Cape Liquor Authority, and we are pursuing that on a number of levels. And then for the year under review, that was also the case. An example of that would be to ensure that ultimately we get to all license holders. There was a very specific directive given within the policy white paper that speaks to ensuring that we have compliance and enforcement capacity. I think that towards the end of the year under review, clear project proposals were written up motivating funds in this regard. And I think that found full expression within the year that followed. I think I also within this context want to respond to the second or further question by Member Kama, and that relates to the rollover or the funds that was availed to the Western Cape Liquor Authority by the department in terms of some savings that were originated there. And that primarily was because we could look at implementing something within the context of additional capacity within compliance and enforcement. So that money basically then came to us. The reason for the rollover, of course, it became available rather late within the financial year, which then required implementation in the new financial year, and that is in August within June or July of 2021, we will then able to action and implement those projects that related to the additional capacity. So I'm trusting that I answered those, Chairperson. And then in relation to your question around differentiation, when we spoke to this aspect a year or two or a half ago, the Western Cape Liquor Authority was mindful that certain amendments to the Liquor Act was required in order for us to pursue that with any measure of success. The reality is that that is taking a bit more time, but we've also taken heed of what was said by Provincial Treasury, that a differentiation of some sort is required before they would look at a substantial increase in the fees that we were requesting. And then on exploring and visiting our own legislation, we have now come to the point, and at this point, it was not, I should say, within the year under review, it was not accepted as yet, meaning we haven't considered by then. But a further development, just to answer your question, is that we now realize that differentiation is possible based on the level or degree of regulation that each and every outlet or licensee brings to bear on us as the Western Cape Liquor Authority. Our argument here essentially is if you require more of the resources of the Western Cape Liquor Authority, then you can be required to be paying more or contributing more to the regulation. And I think this is a further development. This will make us less dependent on, let's say, the review of the Act, but is actually just accessing and utilizing the available avenues within the legislation. It is what we call commonly as the Section 64, which then suggests that automatic renewals will no longer be possible, meaning if we find that your relationship with the Western Cape Liquor Authority is not ideal and that we have challenges in terms of your compliance generally, then we will not automatically renew your license. You will be required to apply for a renewal of your license. I believe that to be a game changer for the Western Cape Liquor Authority, and one that will go that has been taken up in our new APP for the year going forward. Chairperson, I think that responds to it. I'm not sure whether I've actually answered all the questions. Maybe just the last one is your question in relation to the legislative amendment process and where that is at. There is I think what we need to realize is that there are two basically structures looking at this. The one is the task team that has been established in terms of the alcohol harms reduction strategy and what elements of that can be implemented going forward. It deals with the more significant changes to policy and to legislation, such as the hours, and then also minimum unit pricing and available trading hours and trading days. I think that is a process that is ongoing and it will take slightly longer. The others, which I have alluded to, Chairperson, speaks to those aspects that will make it easier for the Western Cape Liquor Authority to regulate more effectively. And those are the ones that have been fast-tracked, and we see that within the next few months being published, and then hopefully within the next 12 months being implemented. Chairperson, I thank you.
Mr. George, thank you so much. I'm covered my side. Member Kama, if there's any follow-up with regard to a specific question that you've posed, I will ask that you ask that at this stage, or any additional questions on pages 6 to 15.
No, covered for this part of the report, Chair.
Thank you so much. Members, with your indulgence, we will then proceed to part B. I note no hands, no objection. Pages 18 to 48, and I will take 18 to 30. So pages 18 to 30. Member Kama, I note you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I actually have a question on page 22 on the compliance and enforcement. With reference to the point of reducing unlicensed liquor outlets and focus on problematic outlets. What I want to understand there, Chair, is what measures. I think this is a question that I would have been asking a number of times, just to get a sense of are we making any inroads or even under the period which is under review, are we making any progress in getting the unlicensed outlets to get licenses? And in that, Chair, I want to get a sense if the department has perhaps done any analysis in terms of understanding whether do we have, or understanding the correlation between the outlets that are licensed, which then lose their licenses, and those that perhaps are unlicensed and get a license. Is there any relationship in that regard? And the other question that I would have, Chair, which emanates also from the concerns that perhaps some people who are running some outlets have, is on the issue of enforcement, where they see that it looks like these ones who are not licensed are not really, there's no law enforcement in that regard, but the areas that are perhaps targeted are the outlets with the licenses. Can we get a sense of what would be the challenges, in terms of the entity enforcing the law with the assistance of SAPS, of course, in the outlets that are not licensed? Because I think these also contribute much more, in the social ills that we see in the different communities. And in that regard, sorry, Chair, for being unnecessarily long. And in that regard, if we can get a sense as to how do we, is there a role that the entity is playing in these unlicensed outlets? And when we go for inspection, do we perhaps get warrants from SAPS, or so that we're able, to access these areas and be able to enforce the law in that regard? Thank you very much, Chair. That's my last question for the Liquor Authority.
Thank you so much, Member Kama. Mr. George, I would just want to latch on in terms of page 22 as well. I can understand, Mr. George, that that the government of the Western Cape will remain committed to the policy interventions, and part of the capacitation and the strengthening of the liquor enforcement units in order to increase the resources, if that in terms of manpower, human resources, etc. And I know we are dealing with human resources later, but on page 22, it's made reference to capacitate and strengthen liquor enforcement units. Are you able to provide us with with an understanding of what would the need be? Have you identified where we need to capacitate and where we need to strengthen, especially across the various districts? And I can understand from the pie chart on where the amount of liquor outlets, valid licenses now in terms of valid licenses per district. So we have the figures, we have the percentage, and do we have a that you can potentially show members, even if it's provided at a later stage, on where those valid licenses are actually located within those districts? Thank you.
Chairperson, thank you very much. Those are, as you indicated, very loaded questions in terms that they are very critical for us to understand. I think the roles and responsibilities of the various role players, but more importantly, how should we collaborate appropriately? We can have an impact on particular spaces within our communities. But in that process, communities are enabled, that they are actually empowered, that these processes that exist within government exist for their benefit. And I think this is an area where in future we have to focus on going forward. So when we speak about people-centric or citizen-centric approaches, it's understanding that there are processes that exist as far as outlets are concerned, whether they're legal or illegal, that will allow them to determine how they function and operate in their particular spaces. So, Chairperson, I'd like to focus first on the issue around license and unlicensed premises. So, by and large, the Western Cape Liquor Authority exists primarily in relation to the regulated space, which means licensed outlets. Any powers that any of the inspectors have or that the Western Cape Liquor Authority derives by operation of law is in relation to the granting of a license and the continued renewal of that license on the basis that it is operated compliant to the rules and the conditions imposed. As far as unlicensed is concerned, that immediately is something that is outside of the domain, just simply looking at the legislation of what it is the Western Cape Liquor Authority is able to do. But why is it important, nonetheless, for us to understand that space and that environment, is that we know for a fact that some of these outlets will exist whether we want them or not. So ultimately, we should be asking the particular question, how do we facilitate regulation in those spaces that will then empower communities to have control over that? So it could very well be in future that when we look at these matters, that public interest may in fact require a kind of licensing in order for them to come into the space. I do believe that ultimately each and every business would like to operate within the confines of the law. I think that I just want to make that statement. But right now, as it stands, the resources and the capacity of the Western Cape Liquor Authority is focused on those that are licensed and processing applications of those that want to be licensed. So which then brings us what is done in respect of those outlets that do not have a license, as Member Karma has indicated. We rely here heavily on the support and interventions of other law enforcement agencies, such as those of the city and, of course, the South African Police Service. I think what we do accept as the Western Cape Liquor Authority is that within the space of liquor and generally the trading of liquor, we'd like to be participating, whether it is in relation to license or unlicensed, it doesn't matter. We believe that our expertise around this could aid in terms of the importance and the understanding of regulating, but also more important, policing unlicensed outlets. I think increasingly if we can convince law enforcement agencies that policing unlicensed outlets is good policing practice, because crime and criminality generally overlays with the consumption of liquor and the abuse of liquor. So I think increasingly we're going to have to start messaging, our messages must reflect that within those particular spaces, in community spaces, that crime, if you curtail alcohol, liquor for that matter, in the same intervention, you can, and at the same time, you will be curtailing crime and criminality as well. So we have to speak to authorities such as the prosecutorial authority and South African Police Service to demonstrate to them that they shouldn't view trading in liquor as a petty offense. I think it's very important that we actually make those appeals to the police and to the prosecutorial service. Chairperson, that I think in relation to the question by Member Karma, and then your question in relation to, I think, capacity. Bear in mind that we fully participate within the area-based team methodology of the department, the provincial government for that matter. We are a key role player in that space. The capacity that has been brought on board, Chairperson, does to demonstrate subsequent to the year under review and the project that was listed then has basically almost threefold, multiplied by 3. Basically, we were in the region of 10, 11. We are now at 33. So that indicates that a considerable capacity has been brought on board by the Western Cape Liquor Authority and our alignment to the safety plan of the Western Cape government. And I think we as a stakeholder now has laid claim to being considered in the same breath as any other agency within that space, that we are capable of delivering as far as that is concerned. Of course, I think at a much higher level, Chairperson, I think there's a need for us to consolidate our systems to develop and produce more. By this, I'm suggesting that if you follow the area-based team methodology and you look at that within throughout the province, then there's a need for us to be speaking to leadership within local government. There's a need for us to speak to the regional leadership of other agencies such as the South African Police Service and commonly define a problem statement that will allow us then to gel our resources in relation to that problem statement. Now, that is where the true value of our consolidated efforts lie, and where we will be able to extract most value from the resources that we have. We are very ideally positioned now in terms of the enforcement capacity. But Chairperson, if I can just say that that capacity now has enabled has required our own systems to be jacked up in a manner that our systems now generate as well over and above the numbers that we are now based on, and the way in which we administer these licenses compel compliance. And that is where the section 64s now will come in, where we actually get the outlets to be much more compliant simply by virtue of the threat of not renewing your license. Chairperson, that was a long-winded response, but I trust it responded adequately to the questions asked. Thank you very much. Maybe just one other comment is that I think in terms of the demonstration of value for the additional capacity going forward within the years that follow, and I think in last year, on the financial year we're now concluding, we can already demonstrate the value of the additional capacity, compliance capacity that has been brought on board. Chairperson, we will, as the leadership of the Western Cape Liquor Authority, do our utmost to retain that capacity and going forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. George. I see, Mr. Kingwell, your hand is raised. I note you.
Just if I might add to what the CEO said, in response to your question around the capacity and the details across the districts, if I could request the management team to submit that to yourselves, rather than us to debate that here. That detail is available and we can just submit that to you.
Thank you so much. That will be in order. Member Kama, I noted earlier on you stated that is all the questions that you have for Part B. I will now table the entire Part B, but should you have any further question for 18 up until 48, any member? Mr. George, if I can just kickstart. Thank you so much for the detailed responses, and I do know that we do take parliamentary questions forward that is directed to the Liquor Authority as well, and we do as members get those replies back. But I wanted to double check from you, Mr. George, in terms of complaints that are lodged against establishments that are licensed. And I do want to commend yourself as well as the HOD that whenever such complaints are taken up, we are kept in the loop, etc. I have perused the entire document in terms of the annual report, but I wanted to check, are we able to get a document or details from you regarding the amount of complaints that were lodged and potentially steps taken by the Liquor Authority in order to deal with those complaints? We do know at times the complaints can be a serious headache to certain residents and to certain stakeholders within our province regarding the activities of licensed establishments when they often go outside of the license agreement. And then Member Kama, I see you.
Thanks, Chair. And mine is not even necessarily a new question. I'm just thinking. I think Mr. George really captured the the understanding that one was having when I was asking the question about the enforcement, and that question I'm raising it because of the concern of losing, those who are in the licensed space, and we have them operating illegally when we actually have an objective of getting as many outlets licensed. Now, what I want to I did not get, Chair, is an understanding, in terms of that actual relationship with subs. That says we have subs doing this, or we from time to time give subs a list of areas that we want them to, look at in terms of these unlicensed outlets. Because I'm raising this because I understand frustrations of an outlet, in the one of the poor areas, where they would from time to time be victims of, if they are not compliant, be victims of fines and everything like that, and ultimately decide to operate illegally because those they see in the township operating illegally are not, bothered. So it was on those basis, and maybe perhaps, Chair, in our interactions as a committee with subs, we need to get also an understanding from subs as to what operations are they running from time to time to target these unlicensed liquor outlets, and I can bet that they have a high contribution, in the crime picture of our province. So if we can get that understanding, and even for subs to relate to the committee as to what are the challenges that they might be facing in ensuring that they enforce the law in that regard. Thank you very much, Chair. That's all.
Thank you so much, Member Kama. Mr. George, I hand back to you.
Chairperson, thank you very much, and Member Kama as well. I really, truly appreciate the engagement and the opportunity to explain the challenges we confront, but we gladly accept. I think with regard to the complaints, I think we need to just register that we have a particular indicator within the, even for the year under review, whereby there's a percentage we commit to dealing with this with a percentage of all complaints received within a certain period of time. As far as the number is concerned, Chair, we can actually make that available, as Mr. Kingwell has indicated, in respect of the districts, and then I think that will also indicate almost like the status of regulation within any given area, and we will gladly compile such a report because the information is indeed available. So thank you. We will do that. In relation to SAPs, I think it's important to understand that we will need to demonstrate, I think, a value for the South African Police Service, and I think increasingly we will at the leadership or management level need to interrogate and engage each other in order to reach the desired impact. But from the Western Cape Liquor Authority perspective, what we can do on our own is actually ensure that ultimately the liquor that flows to the illegal outlets, the system invariably that enables that could very well stem from the licensed outlets. I'm aware that in certain areas that licensed outlets could be running volumes that they wouldn't be able to explain in relation to their own trading capacity. So it's very likely, or I suppose one should say, we are aware that some of these outlets are in fact supplying the illegal outlets. So it's also trading on as far as liquor is concerned, which means that they are not compliant and contrary to the Act. And I think we will step up as far as the legal space is, or the regulated space is concerned, in terms of clamping down on those outlets. Of course, central to this is understanding that communities, we will rely extensively on communities to receive information in this regard and complaints about any outlet. Chairperson, and maybe structurally in terms of process, the issue about complaints, we realize that our compliance can only be enhanced if we enable communities to actually own their spaces, and that we are responsive to their complaints as far as all the outlets are concerned. So if they are licensed outlets, then the Western Cape Liquor Authority must have a system of responding to that. The same applies, and in that process demonstrate an understanding that community members living with this problem may not always be able to, based on the power dynamic in that area, be forthright and identify themselves, but we should be responsive in terms of being able to counter the illegal or illicit trading outside of the conditions. Chairperson, I trust I've responded to the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. George, and for highlighting that you have noted your side regarding information that will be shared with the committee via our procedural officer. Thank you so much. Members, I trust that we are able to state that we have covered part B. I will now take part C, and as you would be aware that part C would be dealt with in Scopa, but is there any burning question that you may have? If not, we will go directly to part D, and part E will also be dealt with in Scopa. I see no hands for part C. Is there any question specific to part D? I am covered my side in terms of the report, and I have noted that we have seen regular quarterly statements around activities conducted by the Liquor Authority? I still see no hands, and I will at this stage request if there is any closing remarks from Mr. George.
Chairperson, thank you very much. I must indicate that the Western Cape Liquor Authority is extremely appreciative of the opportunity to present, and in this regard, we're very grateful to the department as well as the Minister. And then, of course, as the management, we are truly appreciative of the board and the involvement of the board and the guidance that they provide under the leadership of Mr. Kingwell. Can I say simply that the Western Cape Liquor Authority will be pursuing its mandate from the perspective that we are solely responsible for regulating the licensed space, and that we must demonstrate the required leadership as far as that is concerned. That leadership must emanate in our responses and our ability to own the space and reflect to the standing committee that we are gaining in terms of with our better understanding, we are able to change the environment and to enable communities in that process. Key to ultimately having safe spaces would be to recognizing that communities ultimately will allow these spaces or not, and that we as the regulator must be there in assisting the tribunal to arrive and determine public interest, because ultimately public interest must determine whether a licensee is allowed to, one, obtain the license, but more importantly, once the license has been granted, that license is operated in a manner that public interest is always taken into account. Chairperson, I see our engagement of the standing committee as a key part of that process. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. George. Members, in terms of transparency and openness, I hereby further confirm that we have received no request for public input or comment or questions from the public. Mr. Matthews, I trust that we are then able to proceed directly over to docs.
Yes, Chairperson.
Thank you. Thank you so much, members. Based on the opening remarks made by the Minister as well as the HOD, please allow me to table Part A of the annual report for the Department of Community Safety, pages 3 to 10, in conjunction with the opening remarks made earlier. And I trust that members have made notes of that. I will take a round of questions. I do know that we are doing well for time. It is now 9:07, and we will proceed with Part A, Department of Community Safety. I see one hand, Member Kama.
Thank you very much, Chair, and welcoming the remarks from the acting MSc and the HOD. My first question, Chair, would be on page. Firstly, let me just comment, Chair, on the issue of the late tabling, and I think you had at the beginning attempted, to perhaps give the reasons behind this late tabling. If we can get more from the department as to what would have related to what would have resulted to us discussing this report now, and what were these disagreements with the I think that you talked about the disputes. What were these disputes and how were they resolved? But the first question that one intended to have, Chair, is on page 6, paragraph 4, where I think the paragraph talks about the plight, where we saw the plight of our citizens and sought to respond by developing the Youth Safety Ambassador Program, which has seen the appointment of 1,000 safety ambassadors. Now, Chair, can we be able to get a breakdown of these ambassadors? I know we might not have that now, but if we can have that breakdown in terms of their age and gender and race, and also if we can get as to the areas in which these ambassadors are deployed, and perhaps what is their monthly stipend and the duration of the program itself. And other than Chair, because I see here in this paragraph that this is now looked at as an opportunity that has been given to these 1,000 young people, and them receiving an income. But I also still want to understand as to what is the contribution of these safety ambassadors in the fight against crime in the province. The other question I have, Chair, is on page 7, last paragraph, where the department has aligned its programs and projects to a public health approach, which aims to address the root causes of crime and violence. And what I don't understand there, Chair, is that immediately after that, it then talks about the law enforcement program. Now, what I want to understand is really the understanding of the root causes of crime, and because one is looking at the contributions of your spatial planning and all other things that we have been mentioning in the committee in relation to the root causes of crime, and such as that of the service delivery environment. And I want to understand now that in its endeavor to address the causes of crime, what is it that we are doing? Because law enforcement can't be a response to addressing the root causes of crime. And so that's one question that I have around there. The other question, Chair, without being very slow, is on page 8, the first paragraph, last sentence, where it talks about the Youth Work Expanded Public Works Program, which continues to provide 12 to 24-month work placement opportunities. Now, what I would want to understand there is what is the number of these public works interns that we have had in the department, and how are they distributed, you know, across the department, even to the office of the. Do we have any of these being deployed to the offices of the MEC or any senior managers in the department? That is one question. I think the last question that I have, Chair, here is on page 9 on the discontinued activities or activities to be discontinued, and there it says the EPP, the project with CPFs was discontinued based on the department's repurposing process and implementation of the ABT approach. If we can get more understanding there as to, does this mean that the project now has been discontinued in the department, or it was discontinued for the year under review, or it is discontinued to allow for the implementation of the ABT approach? And why did the department decide to stop funding CPFs, and whether any legal advice was sought before such a decision was taken, and was there a process followed and consultation between the department and the CPFs and subs, before this decision was taken, and what would be the impact of this decision, understanding the crucial role that by law CPFs are supposed to play in the fight against crime, and understanding that the issue of community involvement is very much crucial. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Member Kama. I note Member Botha.
Thank you very much, Chair, for noting me, and I'm latching on to Member Kama, and I'm talking to the safety ambassadors. I just want to know, in regard to the year under review, what was the type of training that these safety ambassadors received? What was the money spent on that per head? And I want to know whether that training that they would have received, whether it was an accredited training. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. HOD, if I can just latch on in terms of my opening remarks, and if you are able to provide further clarity on Member Kama's question regarding the dispute, seeing that the delay was as a result of that dispute with the AG. Hence, it is my view that the annual report isn't necessarily late, but there has been a delay in terms of the annual report. I'll take that as a first round and then hand over to you.
Thank you, Honourable Chair and members. I will attempt to answer the questions, and then I will also hand over to the chief directors to come in, and perhaps some of the directors as well. So the first question in relation to the late tabling of our annual report does in fact, as already mentioned, relate to a matter or dispute that we had with the Auditor General. There was a query in relation to the awarding of a contract by the department in relation to the process that we followed. So we followed a process that the AG felt we should have widened the scope in terms of the process that we followed. However, prior to the advertisement of the contract, which was for the EPWP outsourcing, and the reason for the EPWP outsourcing was so that our departmental officials could focus more not on the administration of timesheets and EPWP payments, but focus on service delivery and the establishment of our area-based teams. But before we proceeded, if I could just provide you with some background, before we proceeded with the outsourcing of the EPWP, we sought the advice of both legal services as well as Provincial Treasury. And after extensive consultation with both, because it was the first time that the department was actually outsourcing the EPWP, we then followed the process that was advised in terms of Treasury and legal services advised by them. The AG then had a finding in that regard. We did not agree with the finding, and the matter was then sent to National Treasury for consideration. So the National Treasury, because National Treasury is the custodian of the policies, both ourselves and the AG jointly agreed to refer the matter to National Treasury. The National Treasury then came back and indicated that Provincial Treasury and the CPAC committee needed to provide assurance to National Treasury and confirm that the department did in fact comply with the requirements that were set out by Provincial Treasury in the awarding of this contract and the process that was followed. So it wasn't the issue of who we awarded the contract to, but just the process. And then the CPAC committee then confirmed, they considered the matter, they considered all the documentation that we provided to them, they considered the matter, and then they were able to confirm that we did in fact then comply. The AG then found in our favor after considering the CPAC input, and then the department then achieved the clean audit outcome as a result of the AG then withdrawing that finding based on the evidence and based on the input by Provincial Treasury. I hope that clarifies that issue, Honourable Chair and members. Then the breakdown of the safety ambassadors, we will be able to provide you with the details as indicated, Honourable Member Karma, in terms of age, you said gender, race, and the areas that they were placed in. In terms of the question that was in relation to the public health approach, the department, together with the Department of Health, utilizes the emergency services data. It is based somewhat on the Cardiff model, which has shown great results in how one deals with crime and incidents of this nature. The EMS data provides details in terms of the time of the incident, the location of the incident, etc. And that information assists one in terms of the interventions that you will put in place in a particular area. So those interventions would be law enforcement interventions. So we use the EMS data together with the SAPS data on at a station level, which then informs us on the deployment of the LEAP officers, which are under the command and control of the SAPS, and then also provides us with details and information on the areas in which we need to prioritize for our violence prevention interventions as well. We also follow a life course approach where we look at how these interventions would have a positive impact on a child before birth all the way to the person become an elderly person, and as a Western Cape government as a whole, how these various interventions from various departments will come together to impact positively on a person's life. And then there is a safety steering committee, which used to meet weekly, but now meets every 2 weeks. And then all relevant departments are participating on that steering committee, as well as we have the City of Cape Town, we have the SAPS on that committee as well. And then at that committee level, we look at violence prevention interventions, we also at law enforcement interventions, but then also bringing in, as I indicated, the health data, and then also the urban design information. So for example, if we look at the city where the 11 or 10 murder stations are, the data from the city's urban management team also informs some of those interventions, and we're working very closely with all of them so we can bring all these interventions in one space, because ultimately, as we all know, law enforcement may result in the stabilization and the normalization in an area, but what we really need are the violence prevention interventions, the urban design interventions, and your crime prevention through environmental design as well, to really change the trajectory of a vulnerable person's life in those communities. I think in terms of the EPWP, you asked in terms of the number and the distribution. So in the main, our EPWP has always consisted of the chrysalis graduates. So the chrysalis graduates, once they finish their 3 months residential training, are then placed on a work placement for up to 24 months by the Department of Community Safety. We place them at courts, at municipalities, etc. It depends on what that chrysalis graduates training has been about. So for example, if it's someone who's a hairdresser, and prefers to follow that career path, then we would look at options to be able to unleash their potential in that regard. If someone is trained, for example, in law enforcement and interested in that, we would look at placing them at the law enforcement or through the NPA at the courts, etc. So we try to do a match and placement. However, with the Safety Ambassador Program, we received a once-off amount from Provincial Treasury, which allowed us then to appoint the over 1,000 safety ambassadors. The safety ambassadors were placed at schools throughout the province, and we can provide you with those details. And some of them remained in office to manage the administration of the safety ambassador contracts, because, and this is largely due to the issue with the Auditor General, because as soon as the Auditor General raised the matter, and although we felt that we had followed all due processes, we immediately stopped the outsourcing of the EWP. We then started paying the safety ambassadors in-house. So we took on that burden. It's been extremely difficult, but we did not want to perpetuate a wrong should the AG finding have not been in our favor after the dispute was attended to. So we currently paying the safety ambassadors in-house until the end of March. We've already advertised to outsource again because obviously there was no finding there in terms of the manner in which we manage the process of the EPW outsourcing, and that created that administrative burden here. So some of the safety ambassadors remained to manage the contracts, to assist our EPWP unit and our finance unit that obviously now had to manage just not the 700 chrysalis graduate contracts and payments, but then over 1,700 at the end of the day. However, we have not received an additional allocation for safety ambassadors in the new financial year, so we will only be having between 80 and 100 safety ambassadors, and those safety ambassadors will then be linked to the area-based teams and will report to either the chrysalis junior instructor youth hubs or the area-based coordinators of the Department of Community Safety that will manage those areas. They will not be, for example, just in a school. Having them placed in the school was just a stopgap measure until we were able to have our area-based teams fully functional and in place. Chair, I'm going to then move on to the EPP. The Department of Community Safety has discontinued the EPP. And this is largely due to feedback from the CPFs. As the members will also note, many CPFs were not in favor of the expanded partnership program as a funding model. So we discontinued that, and then CPFs for this financial year have continued to be able to access funding on provision that they had a valid AGM, and they were able to, all CPFs then, not just those that were functional on the EP as in the past, all CPFs that had AGMs could qualify for once-off funding by the Department of Community Safety. Going forward, we will not have a specialized funding model just for CPFs. We will fund the initiatives in an area-based space, which will include all safety stakeholders in that space. So for example, if the data and the evidence shows us that in a particular area you have a challenge with youth in that area, then we will have an intervention that we will fund that will then focus on youth in that particular area. So we want the data and the evidence to guide us. We don't want to be just having or paying or funding interventions in a particular area that may not have the desired impact that would be aligned with our life course approach, our public health approach, and then having an impact where we change things on the ground in disadvantaged areas, which will have long-term impact for especially our young children of today that if we could change it to have them have access to services, have interventions in place that focuses on their schooling and everything that you can think of in terms of violence prevention interventions, urban design interventions, etc. So it's pooling of resources in a particular space to have that desired outcome. Chair, I'm going to pause here and I'm going to ask the team to add any details that they may be able to provide at this time, especially in relation to the safety ambassador training. Honorable Member Kama, the safety ambassadors were trained at the Chrysalis Academy, and we will be able to provide details of that, but I will open it up, Honorable Chair, with your permission to the other members in the meeting that may be able to also provide some information, members from my department, that is. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much for the detail, HOD. I do note that further to our engagement during the last quarter of last year, when we had a presentation on the various programs that the department is rolling out. I will just search for that one again. But thank you so much. That was the first round. Members, we are still on part A. Can I double check if there's any points of clarity or if there's any question linking to page 10 to 17? I see Member Kama. I'll take you, sir.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to perhaps maybe do some follow-ups at this stage. Firstly, around the CPF's funding model, whether is there an explanation, to the CPFs, a communication in this regard in terms of what would be this new funding model, or how will the department continue to fund? Is there any explanation in that regard? And perhaps if that can be also forwarded to the committee, so that we have an understanding of how this will work, and how do you apply? There are certain periods that are set for CPFs to apply. The other follow-up that I have, which came from the HOD in response to the EPWP program, and around the placement of the Chrysalis graduates. I understand, HOD, that through your chair, that is the placement is for a certain period, and after being a graduate, and I know that concerns have been in the past raised around as to what then happens, beyond that, and perhaps ask a question, Chair, as to are we looking at the placements and support in terms of those who would perhaps, out of being graduates of this Chrysalis Academy, opt to pursue some academic route, where we can work with some institutions, training institutions that can further, academically train these graduates in the various fields, of course, that they would have received training on in the academy. And lastly, Chair, if we can get an understanding of whether is there any approved projects in terms of your urban redesign that would have emanated from the engagements that the HOD is talking about, with the city, in ensuring that we really prevent, in terms of our prevention efforts, crime prevention efforts. So are there any approved projects? If there are those, if we can just also receive them as the department, so that we can measure, you know, our response in this regard. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you so much, Member Kama. HOD, in terms of the vacancies, page 16, are you able to provide us with an update in that regard? One particular, there's one chief director in that, which is quite a critical post. Do we have an update in that regard? And HOD, I know that we do look at the annual report as a document for the last year, and it is incumbent for us to then take that into account, the various briefings that we get and how we engage the department during the year, if it's sittings, if it's oversight, if it's parliamentary questions, etc. But are you able to touch just briefly on the new, at the time, there was a number of initiatives that were undertaken by the department in terms of the safety plan. Are you able to briefly touch on it in terms of the K9 unit? We've already received feedback on the safety ambassadors. Are you able to touch base on the ABTs, where we currently are now, and how the last financial year assisted us in getting to this point? The law enforcement, the deployment that took place during that year, and where we are now, I think that will be helpful in terms of the year that we are looking at under review, to ultimately say, but this is where we are now, and all of that helped towards where we are now, especially some of the members, and we went to the launch of the Overstrand and the Swartland municipalities when the K9 units were launched. I think that will also be helpful in this regard. And then before we close off part A, I see Member Christians.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, just also, you know, in the beginning, when I spoke, and I just waited for this opportunity, you know we don't have oversight. We only have oversight of police, but because crime is so rife, the province has taken proactive measures in order to get the LEAP officers and the K9 unit and all of those type of things. So the province, through the municipalities, is funding these initiatives. And I've asked this before I think to the HOD or to the previous minister, you know, the oversight over that. We heard here in the newspapers that people are shot by law enforcement, these LEAP officers. You know, training is questioned when it comes to this. It's just quick, trained, and they're out in the road. So it's all these questions. And that's why I think the HOD will remember where I always ask about the role. I would like our committee also to have a role like we have over Metro Police, where they come and report the year plan. More interaction, because people are approaching us and we don't have the answers because we don't know what's happening. So if the HOD can just give you, I mean, the K9 unit is a splendid thing and it's doing good work. But they report to the municipalities, but what is the role of the province and this committee when it comes to oversight over these things? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Member Christians. HOD, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I think this round I am going to ask David Coetzee and Johan Brandt to come in as well. But just maybe I could start in terms of the CPF funding model. I'm going to ask David Coetzee and Hanmarie Marshall to come in on that in terms of the engagements with the CPFs. In terms of the placement of the chrysalis graduates, we are looking towards placing the chrysalis graduates and paying the stipend, not just for 12 months now, but 24 months. We, in the past, paid the stipend for 24 months when there was a request from the placement institution, which we then considered. However, we have taken a decision to now pay the stipend for a full 24 months. In terms of employment opportunities, Honourable Member Kama, I know the Department of Economic Development and Tourism also has a strategic indicator where they are supposed to also focus on the term beyond the placement and job opportunities for the chrysalis graduates as well. We also expect the placement institutions to also play a role in further training, in further employment opportunities as well, because the Department of Community Safety is paying the stipend for 24 months. And during that time, there's an expectation that they further empower the youth and also provide opportunities. And I will just cite one example. The National Prosecuting Authority has just recently employed the chrysalis graduate youth that were placed there with them. Also, in terms of, I will ask Dave Kutsia and Johan to speak briefly also on the urban design interventions and how we're working very closely together with the city on some of the projects in relation to urban design interventions in a priority area or a murder station. Honorable Chair, in terms of the structure on page 16, currently the Chief Director Secretariat for Safety and Security is full. Chief Director or former Director David Kutsia has been appointed as the Chief Director Secretariat for Safety and Security. And then the Director Post Monitoring and Evaluation, as I indicated earlier, that has been filled by Mr. Beki Simalane, and today is his first day in that position. Beki has been a director in our Policy and Research Directorate for a number of years, so we're happy that he's joining the SMS team as of today. I will also ask David Kutsia to speak on the K9 units and the area-based teams, etc. We are also in the process of establishing a reaction unit in the Overstrand municipality and the Swartland municipality to complement what the K9 units are doing. So it's not just having capacity in the city, but then also ensuring that there is capacity in the district municipal space and the local municipal space and in the rural areas as well. In terms of the oversight over LEAP, Honorable Member Karma or Christians, that is exactly what we would like to see as well. We had a meeting last Monday with the National Minister of Police and his senior management team, his legal advisors, the Premier, and I was also included, as well as the city. We've agreed that the Department of Community Safety will coordinate the coming together of a high-level task team, which will be made up of the SAPs, which will be made up of the provincial government ourselves, as well as the city, where we look at this gap in oversight. And it's just not the Western Cape, but it's countrywide, where in terms of law enforcement, IPA does not have oversight, or provincial government does not have oversight, or the ombudsman does not have oversight. So we're going to look at change in legislation, perhaps to the Criminal Procedure Act, and how best we can manage that from here on. We're also looking at options as to maybe some of the law enforcement or LEAP officers becoming municipal police officers or metro police officers as well. I just want to also emphasize that the incidents that of the two shootings, the one here on the foreshore as well as in Rondebosch, were not LEAP officers. They were law enforcement personnel of the city, but not LEAP officers. However, this is an area that we want to see addressed. Our LEAP officers are working under the command and control of the SAPs, and the Department of Community Safety was very strict in that regard. We were adamant that the LEAP officers were not just going to be doing operations on their own, but they ultimately report to the station commander in that particular station. And that then obviously leads to minimizing of incidents of this nature. But then I also want to emphasize that the firearm training that the LEAP officers receive are exactly the same firearm training that the SAPS officers receive. Honorable Chair, if you will allow me, then I'm going to hand over first to David Kutsia to come in, and then perhaps Johan Brandt wants to come in any of the other DOCS management team as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. With regards to the question on the community safety forums, we did communicate, Director Henry Marshall did communicate with all CPFs how we're going to take the new funding forward and our new repurposing in the start of the year. So we will also formally communicate that with the committee. Also, just to add that we also procured a service provider to support CPFs with training, similar we're doing to neighborhood watches. So, and we're regularly in discussion then with the CPF and then SAPs on what type of training. So we provided all CPFs this year with meeting skills, and the new request for the financial year coming is about project management and project implementation. Hanmarie can also say something more on that. So also what we realized with the placements of the public work program is that we want to look this year of establishing a learnership, so that it's a law enforcement learnership, so that when we place learners, they actually come out of the program with something meaningful and they can use after, and we're hoping that's going to also improve their employability. We realize that this is a 12 to 24 month stopgap. So from the department, we were going to look in this new financial year of establishing a learnership in that. With the area-based teams, all 16 area-based teams have been established, and we're looking, as some member indicated, it's not about the law enforcement, but bringing together the social and the urban design. And we realize law enforcement is a stabilization. You stabilize the area, but then you need the violence and social interventions to come together in that space, so you can actually maintain the safety in that. And that's what the 16 area-based teams are focused on doing. Going forward next year, we will also then look at each area and developing a profile and a list of interventions that we're going to implement in the area in the coming financial year. So that's all been put in place. What we also realize is that the oversight over municipal K9s and reaction teams is critical. But what we are currently using, because we transfer the funding with a TPA, we are actually then having monthly meetings with the K9 units and reaction teams to ensure that they comply with the stipulations in the business plan. And that's also then some form of oversight. It's not ideal, but we're finding that also having that relationship and getting the quarterly reports that are submitted to the councils is also helping assist to manage those projects and make sure they're effective and efficient. Thank you, Chair. I think I've covered the points. I don't know if Hanmarie just wants to add something about the CPF.
Thank you, Chairperson. May I continue?
Advocate, by all means. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Chairperson, I'm glad to confirm that the 151 CPFs had successful certified AGMs, all facilitated by the department. I can confirm that the project funding was communicated to the CPFs on various occasions, that 91 of the CPFs applied for the project funding, 78 of those applications could be approved, and 65 of them have been paid, received the funding. We are currently rolling out, it's been rolled out to 4 clusters, and we will complete it this quarter, training to CPFs to capacitate the newly elected executives. They're receiving training in meeting skills, their roles, responsibilities, their how to solve conflict at meetings. This has been outsourced to a service provider, and the CPFs, there's good participation and support by SAPs. The change in the department's direction and the fact that the EPP will stop was communicated timeously as well. Also consulted with our SAPS partners at the provincial office. They were, over the course of a year, informed of the changes, our new focus, that CPFs will remain one of our safety partners, but that we will also focus on our other safety partners and specifically in the 16 ABT areas. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you so much, Advocate Anne-Marie van Zyl. HOD, I trust that we are covered on that round, or is there any further input that you would want to make at this stage?
Thank you, Chair. I think we are covered. If there are any follow-up questions, we will gladly answer them.
Thank you so much. Members, it is now 9:49. We are about to conclude part A. May I get an understanding from you that if there's no additional questions now, can we take a quick 15-minute break and then proceed from part B? As part B is quite a lengthy part from 19 to 88, and I wouldn't want to kickstart part B and then stop it midway. We have started at 8. Would it be okay with members if we then come back at 10:05? Would that be in order?
In order with the Chairperson.
Baie dankie. HOD officials, for those that are watching online, we will take a quick break of 15 minutes. Thereafter, we will commence with part B of our interaction and engagement around the annual report. On that note, HOD, thank you so much. Minister, thank you so much for you being here. We will promptly commence at 10:05.
Thank you.
Thank you.
shortly continue with our meeting, and we are on part B. We are discussing the annual report for the Department of Community Safety. Previously, we have engaged the Western Cape Liquor Authority, and we have dealt with part A of the annual report. Members, thank you so much for your engagement up to this point. We have had feedback from the Western Cape Liquor Authority, from the HOD, introductory remarks from the Minister as well. With us, we have our procedural officer, Mr. Wasim Matthews, who is in our meeting as well. All officials are still present. HOD, we will strictly deal with part B at this stage, and we are on page 19 to 30. Members, if you have made any notes your side in terms of the annual report dealing with pages 19 to 30 of part B of the annual report, I will take a round of questions and input points of clarity at this time. I wish to remind members again that our meeting is live on YouTube as well, and directly after we have conducted the interrogation and the discussion around the annual report, we will then note if there's any particular person of any stakeholder, member of residents, and members of the public that wishes to give input. I still see no hands, members. We are on part B. I see we will commence, and I will just double check. HOD, you are present. Minister, you are present.
Yes, Honorable Chair.
Thank you so much. We are good to go. Member Kama, I hand over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Chair. My question would be on page, first question is on page 23. I think there where we talk about gender-based violence, it says according to the quarterly crime statistics, the number of sexual offenses recorded nationally decreased, and the percentages are given. There's a decrease there's a decrease nationally and in the Western Cape. So my question is around the challenge of I think the Commission for Gender Equity would have always spoke about the challenge of lack of reporting of such cases, but we know that we have a serious GBV challenge in society in general. So I would want to ask whether under the year under review, whether in the department the HOD would have not received any allegations of gender-based violence that are leveled against anyone within the department in its totality, and perhaps get a sense as to if such cases are reported, what is the internal reporting mechanism that is followed, and would that be the same process that is followed even if it were to be cases of that are criminal, I mean in nature, such as these ones of sexual what you call. And the other question, Chair, on the very same page, where it talks about the 8 of the top 10 police precincts that reported the most sexual assault cases in the fourth quarter of 2020-21 are in the Western Cape, and an increase there in sexual assault cases is identified. Now, I would want, and I believe it's possible, Chair, that we might rate, up in the country in terms of the precincts with high increase in such sexual crimes. And I would want to get an understanding from the department as to what strategies are in place to address the challenge of gender-based violence and what focused interventions are in place in the top 8 precincts. Those are the questions up to page 30, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Member Kama. HO, I see another hand. Oh, thank you, Member Kama, for lowering your hand. HOD, there is on page number 22 as well, in terms of substance abuse, via our oversight role as a committee, we established that there is over 1,557 known drug houses in the province. In terms of the substance abuse, and we do know it is directly linked to gangsterism and crime, with regard to the selling of drugs in our communities. We also know that there's engagement between the South African Police Service and the department around measures in order to ensure that we do more in order to close down those drug houses. From the department side, are you able to bring us in terms of the steering committees that are discussing these in more detail with SAPS as the leading agent, and the role that the department plays in that regard? We also know as a committee, in terms of potential engagement with the city of Cape Town, in terms of the LEAP deployments to our hotspot areas, and often, if not all those hotspot areas, will have a high level of gangsterism and drug abuse happening in those societies. Are you able to indicate the role that the department plays within lowering the amount of drug houses, and any engagement around the city with rental stock, for example, that is problematic to a large extent? That is all from me for this first opening round. I am just double checking. Do I see any additional hand? HOD, I will hand back over to you at this stage.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Just in terms of Member Kama's question, and I'm going to then ask for David Kutsia and Johan Brandt to come in relation to the other questions on some of the drivers of crime and how we are dealing with it. So I'm going to, in terms of the question to me, whether I received any allegations of GBV leveled in the department in its totality in the current financial year. So no, I did not receive any allegations until last Sunday evening. And the action that I took, and it has been reported in the media, I have then suspended 4 staff members in the office of the ministry. So prior to Sunday evening, no allegations were reported to me. However, we do have a policy in place. There is a sexual harassment officer that the department has appointed. The details of the sexual harassment officer are readily and widely available in the department. So if there are any incidents or allegations being made, should those allegations be brought to my attention, I will immediately act upon them, as I have done in the past week. We have also given our full cooperation to the employee relations section within the Department of the Premier, who are currently investigating those allegations. And there are personnel in our department or within the ministry that we will continue to support during this time as well. In terms of the gender-based violence matters, I'm going to request that David and Johan come in there And then in terms of what the department does, in relation to, as I indicated, there's some of the drivers of crime, the firearms, the substance abuse, the drug houses, etc. We work very closely with the SAPs as well as the LEAP officers in the priority areas where the LEAP officers also are given, information in terms of what we require them to focus on. There have been many incidents, but I will leave it up to the colleagues to speak further on this, where there have been many firearms and ammunition that have been confiscated. There's been a large amount of drugs that have also been confiscated, and also arrests being made in this regard as well. So on a weekly basis, we do receive a report of all the successes and all the highlights of the LEAP officers that are working in conjunction with the SAPs. The department is also very involved in terms of engaging with the SAPs as well as the LEAP officers in those individual areas. Chair, I'm going to pause here and I'm going to ask perhaps Johan, you want to come in first here, and David to add, and any of the other colleagues as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair, and all the members. I can just confirm what the HOD is saying, Mr. Chair. In terms of, firstly, gender-based violence, I think gender-based violence is a massive problem in the Western Cape. In the ABT areas, we've specifically identified this as one of the key actions to focus on. In that sense, the Department of Social Development and the other government departments is assisting us in addressing this. We have, for instance, a working arrangement where in some areas, like specifically Khayelitsha, at one stage the department was struggling to get to the victims and to actually support the victims, and then there was a request that we should request law enforcement officials to assist them, as David have referred to earlier, in terms of stabilization and normalization. That's where the stabilization happened, and then the department could normally do their function, the Department of Social Development I'm referring to. In relation to the LEAP, we have seen an increase in the recovery of firearms, Chair, from 22 firearms during the first year of LEAP to 147, I beg yours, in total 147 firearms in 2 years, and 22 in the first year, and then 125 in the second year. And my calculation is correct. That's a 350% increase in the recovery of firearms. In terms of drug successes, also the same. And we are getting a weekly progress report from the city officials on those successes, because that is what we see from a law enforcement perspective that can be done to ensure that we create safety on the flats, and that also we be able to address the murders in that way. Thank you very much.
Mr. Brandt, thank you so much. HOD, before we proceed, I just want to double check if we are to request via a resolution to obtain a monthly report in that view. Would that be in order, HOD or Mr. Brandt, so that the committee is also kept more up to date? I know we ask parliamentary questions, but if it's a standard in terms of what we are doing, I think that will be very helpful. We have members like Member Kama, Member Christians, Member Botha, Member Bosman. Everyone at times they give input on what could potentially be done differently. And if we are more seeing that on a more regular basis, it could potentially just help in us fostering the relationship and looking at it in more detail. Would that be in order?
Yes, Chairperson, we will gladly do so. We will provide you with a consolidated report on a monthly basis.
Thank you so much. That will be appreciated. Members, I do appreciate the engagement that we are doing here today and the openness and the transparency. And I have noted certain questions directed to the HOD. Thank you, HOD, for your transparency and for answering those questions. But I will encourage members that we deal with the annual report. We will definitely in the near future have an opportunity to engage deeper into the last week and a half with regard to public comments and media statements regarding the department as well as Minister Fritz. I trust that members will find that in order so that we do have that opportunity to engage and to exercise our oversight. But we will proceed. Members, we were on page number 19 to 30. Is there any point of clarity, further question in that regard? If not, we will go to page number 40. 30 to 40. I see pages. I see Member Kama.
Thank you very much, Chair, and let me appreciate the responses that we've been given so far. On page 32, Chair, perhaps it's just a question of clarity and around if you look at outcome 3.1, where it talks about to contribute toward the reduction of crime in areas where law enforcement officers are deployed. And there you talk about LEAP enforcement operations which were implemented during and after lockdown period. And you say approximately 1,226 autonomous operations were conducted. If we can get an explanation of that, because there is one where you indicate that they were done with subs, but this one speaks about autonomous operation. Can we get an understanding of what does that mean in light of what the HOD would have said earlier, that operations of the LEAP officers should be done through the command of subs. The other question that I have, Chair, is on page 33, where you talk about accredited neighborhood watches. I want to get an understanding if under the current another year under review, whether do we have active neighborhood watches in all the crime hotspot areas? If not, why not? And if not, which areas do not have? And what are the challenges in that regard? And where perhaps, Chair, maybe if we can be furnished with a detailed breakdown of the expenditure on these neighborhood watches for that particular year under review. And the other question, Chair, on page or no, that's the last one up to page 40. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you so much, Member Kama. Good day, Member Kama. Are you able to hear me, members?
Yes, we can hear you now, Chair.
Thank you so much. I think I just lost connectivity quickly. Thank you, Member Kama. HOD, I'm covered for those pages. I do note on page number 40 is mentioned of the PNP reports, and we are in the process of finalizing our meeting on that. So I will keep my engagement around the PNPs for that particular engagement, but I will hand over directly to you at this stage.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. So I'm going to ask the colleagues to answer some of the questions in greater detail in terms of the operations, in terms of the more serious operations. The LEAP officers work under the command and control of the SAPs, but Johan can give further information in terms of those autonomous operations. And then in terms of the neighborhood watches, I'm going to hand over to Acting Chief Director Fred Watkins to answer that question, and also request other colleagues to answer if required. Thank you, Chair. So Johan Brand first, and then Fred Watkins. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair and Mr. Kama. Yes, Mr. Kama, in regarding the operations, you will also remember that all the LEAP officers are also law enforcement officers. So they have the powers as that was published in the Government Gazette in October 2019 by the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development. So they still have the powers to also perform autonomous operations, specifically in terms of the law enforcement duties, the issuing of Section 56 notices, the issuing of Section 341 notices, the inspections conducted at liquor premises on and off consumption, because they're also working very close with the Western Cape Liquor Authority, as you've heard from the CEO earlier. So they also have to conduct autonomous operations, but we also measure them in terms of the integrated operations with other city forces, because the Metro Police are also some of the city forces as well as traffic. So on a weekly basis, and the report, Chairperson and honourable members, will include all this statistics that I'm giving you now, or the kind of actions that I'm giving you, because we're measuring them on terms of that, in terms of their performance, and then their joint operations with SAPs. I can just state with the report that I have in front of me is a weekly report, and during that week they had 134 autonomous operations in the areas where they deployed, and joint operations with SAPs 126. So basically that's on a 50% basis that I have autonomous and joint, if that explains your question, Honourable Kama. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. To answer Member Kama's questions on the neighbourhood watches, I can confirm that in the areas, the hotspot areas, we have established neighbourhood watches or accredited neighbourhood watches in all areas. Obviously, one would want to have more. And then in terms of the expenditure, we spent a total of 7.7 million on neighbourhood watch support in terms of the funding, and then in terms of the starter kits that we issue them on accreditation. I can send you a breakdown, Chairperson, for the different years if you would require it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. That will be highly appreciated, so that can be circulated to members as well. HOD, are we covered and ready to proceed?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Members, any clarity seeking question? We were on pages 30 to 40. If not, we will go to up until page 50. We will go up until page 60. I see Member Kama.
Thanks, Chair. If I may, Chair, I just had missed that I have one from 30 to 40. No, from 40 to 50, and then another one from 50 to 60.
By all means, you can ask that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. My first question, Chair, then would be on page 43 on the second paragraph, where you talk about the court watching briefs program. I want to then understand, Chair, as to what is the number of the officials employed in the department that are responsible for this particular program, and perhaps get the number of GBV cases that were monitored during the year under review, and that can be provided later if the department might not have the answer now. And specifically also want to understand whether what work has been done to monitor, or is the case, the sexual assault case against I think it's Mr. Bakis from the Provincial Treasury, is it part of the cases that are monitored by this court watching brief program? Thank you. Oh, that's the first one, sorry, Chair. And then the other one, Chair, is on page 58, the last paragraph. I think there you talk about that the department has created 941 work opportunities for youth by placing them at the Western Cape government departments in municipalities and NGOs. Now, my question is how many, if we can get a breakdown there, Chair, also in terms of the gender question and the race question. And I also want to understand what kind of work are these young people doing? Is it for a certain period of time? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Kama. I will then hand back to the HOD.
Thank you, Chair. Honourable Member Kama's question. I'm going to further hand over to the Chief Director to answer in terms of the court watching briefs. And if we do not have specific details on the cases monitored, etc., we will definitely provide that information to you after this sitting. In terms of the work opportunities, we will also provide you with that breakdown. As I previously indicated, it's in the main chrysalis graduates that are placed between 12 months and 24 months. And we try to link and align the needs and the future aspirations of the youth with the placements that we make. But I will pause here and allow David Kutsia to come in, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. With the court watching briefs, I have currently 3 active members and there are 5 posts. There are 2 vacancies. Those vacancies we are looking at addressing when we do the repurposing in our department. So we're looking then at staff optimization. So that process will be conducted in the last part of this financial year. The number of cases we'll report, I don't have that on hand. And then with regards to the official at Treasury, if that case is referred to us, then we would monitor that. So it's on a specific procedure that we will implement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Kutsi. HOD, in terms of the questions that were posed, and I've made a note in terms of the neighborhood watches, and I do know I drafted a parliamentary question already, but are we able to get? I know that there has been, I know the amount of neighborhood watches that we do have per area, but are you able to give an indication in terms of that once a structure, once accreditation is expired, steps taken by the department in order to get the conversation going regarding the up-to-date accreditation? Are you able to provide input in that regard?
Thank you, Chairperson. I will be handing over to Acting Chief Director Watkins again, but I just also want to inform the committee that currently our Western Cape Community Safety Act has very onerous regulations for neighborhood watchers to follow, to be accredited, and we are looking at that and reviewing the act and the regulations to simplify the processes for neighborhood watchers. So we're in the process of doing that. If I can then hand over to the Acting Chief Director to answer in greater detail. Thank you.
Thank you, HOD. Thank you, Chairperson. Yes, what I can report on, Chairperson, is that we are currently in the process of automating our neighborhood watch system, which then also includes an alert once 3 months before the neighborhood watch accreditation is expiring, so that we can maintain contact with that neighborhood watch to ensure that their accreditation remains, or at least is then reapplied. I think I must also just note that, as we know, that the Community Safety Act accreditation of neighborhood watches is voluntary, and we do have certain cases or certain instances where the neighborhood watch then does not respond to that. However, we continue with follow-ups because we understand how important it is to have these neighborhood watch structures in the communities. I trust that does answer your question, Chairperson.
Thank you so much, Mr. Watkins. I am delighted to hear whenever we do walkabouts with certain neighborhood watches, especially once the accreditation is about to expire, it's always incumbent to ensure that we do our utmost to ensure that it is up to date always. So thank you for that feedback. Members, we are on pages 40 to 50 on part B. I will take it in the same fashion by 50 to 60. Any pertinent question 50 to 60? If not, it will be to 70. Member Kama.
Thank you very much, Chair. One question there, which is on page 68, on the last paragraph, the feasibility of upgrading the CCTV software currently used within the Western Cape government was explored to ensure best picture quality. Now, the question that I want to pose, Chair, is how much was spent on this upgrade, and what is the total number of CCTVs that are installed in government buildings, including the number per department? And of course, that can be provided later if they don't have the details now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. HOD, I would assume that will be provided in writing.
Yes, we can do so. Chair, I'm not sure if Mr. Fred Watkins would like to come in with a comment or two, but we will be able to provide that after the sitting as well.
Yes, thank you, HOD, Chairperson and Member Kama. If the paragraph actually states that we are in the busy exploring the feasibility of replacing the CCTV. However, I can provide a detailed breakdown of our current system and what spend there is per department, which we will provide then after this meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Members, on that note, let me table pages 60 to 88. Any questions? Points of clarity? The entire part B has now been tabled for discussion, input. I trust that based on the silence, we are able to conclude part B. And we will then promptly proceed to part C, As indicated previously, and members would be fully aware that Part C deals with governance, and this section is also dealt with Scoper. But if there's any pertinent question that any member would have and they are unable to be in Scoper later, then you are at liberty to ask that now, or I will go directly to Part D. Members, can I get an understanding? Should we go directly to Part D? I am still audible.
Yes, Chair.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you so much. Members, let me table Part D. Any questions? Pages 107 to 148. Pages 107 to 148. I see Member Kama.
Thank you, Chair. I have one question on page 120 on table 3.4.4. I think it's about the reasons why staff resigned, but I want to focus on the no reason provided. And I want to check if the department is not concerned, because I see this number is bigger than the other two, and perhaps then ask about issues of staff morale in the department, or perhaps what could be the contribution to those people who resign and not even provide a reason. Thank you, Chair. I think that's the only question on Part D. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you so much, Member Kama. HOD, please forgive me if this question is going to, let me try to ask. On 137, there's a table that caught my attention in terms of annual leave that was taken for the calendar year, 1 January to the end of December. I've noted the total number of employees that are using the annual leave and the average number of days taken. And in light of the COVID and the difficulties that life often brings about, are you able to speak to that particular table in terms of will those that qualify for leave and for the amount of leave that they do have, or all members and all officials making use of their leave days, obviously to recuperate and to enjoy that family time, for example. Are you able to speak to that particular table, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'm going to ask the Chief Director Management Support to come in as well. So just the question in terms of the reason. I think all our staff members that leave the department are afforded an opportunity to have an exit interview with us, and then also to provide reasons. Some of them choose not to have exit interviews and not provide reasons. A case in point is two of our personnel actually left yesterday. The one is going to pursue other opportunities, which he told me about personally, but did not have an official exit interview. And our other staff member is also taking on an early retirement, but may not necessarily have chosen to officially have an exit interview in this regard. I would like to think, despite the most recent developments we have faced as a team, that our staff morale is not at an all-time low, but an all-time high. It has been the first time in the history of this department that all staff members have been involved in providing input into the strategic direction of the department. We were supposed to have our strategic planning session with all staff late last year, but with the onset of the fourth wave, we have postponed it to this year. So we will continue to do so. Our staff members, many of them who are very passionate about community development and work in communities, have embraced our new area-based team methodology, where we're putting our efforts towards these prioritized areas. So I would like to think that the morale is good. And then just in terms of leave, if any one of us do not take our leave days for the particular period, you only have until June of the following year to take your annual leave. Otherwise, you actually forfeit that. However, we do encourage our personnel to do take leave, to do take a break as well, and encourage them to also then take 10 days, consecutive days leave at a stretch, so that they are able to refresh themselves and also spend time with their families and loved ones as well. Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if the Chief Director Management Support would like to add anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson and HOD. No, I think we covered HOD. Maybe just to reflect then, linked to the question on leave, specifically the annual leave, maybe just to add there that we can also see, and we've done an analysis on the sick leave also, especially the impact of COVID as well. But we have seen that the average number of days per employee has remained relatively the same as the previous cycle, so the same year of the previous cycle. So that's also monitored very closely. But as HOD has also said, we do encourage staff to take their leave, especially with COVID and the impact of COVID on families and individuals. We know that people are working from home, so they tend to work longer hours, and it's difficult to shut down. But we have been encouraging our staff to take a break and take leave and just look after their well-being as well. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you so much, members. On this particular part, the entire part has been tabled. Any burning question, clarity-seeking question that you may have before we conclude, members would be aware that Part E will be dealt with in Scopa this afternoon. In the absence of any indication, I will then allow for closing remarks from the Minister as well as from the HOD. Minister, thank you so much for your attendance here today. I see the Minister.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have a lot to say, just to thank the Standing Committee in the manner that we conduct this whole meeting today. Thank you so much. And I'll see you, maybe I'll see you later again. And go well, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Minister. Committee members would be aware that based on our letter that the Premier directed to the Standing Committee on the appointment date of Minister Andrew Maree as the Acting Minister for Community Safety. HOD.
Thank you very much, Chairperson and members. Also from my side, I would just like to thank all the members for your support, for your guidance, for always holding us accountable. And we do appreciate that. I also want to thank our new acting minister for her tremendous support during this difficult times, and then also to thank the team, the departmental team as well, for their support during this time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, HOD. And the words difficult was used quite often during our committee today in reference to the last 8-9 days. And I do want to thank you and the Minister for all that you have done in terms of your roles respectively. It is highly appreciated. Members, thank you for your diligent oversight. I wish to also thank members for the restraint in terms of dealing with the annual report, as we do know that in front of our committee we will have further engagement around matters that were in the public domain that directly affects this particular department. So once again, thank you so much. We have received, for the record, we have received no request from any member of the public, but for transparency, I just want to double check from our procedural officer, Mr. Wasim Matthews, to confirm that we have received no request for public input.
Thank you, Chairperson. I can confirm that no input has been received or request to present to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you so much. On that note, the department, the minister, officials, you are duly excused. I know some of you will be back later this afternoon for Scoper, but thank you so much. It feels like we are already in April or May, but please have an amazing rest of your morning. The members will remain behind.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Members, as the department and stakeholders are exiting our meeting, Mr. Wasim Matthews, thank you so much for your assistance. Wasima, Hassan, Musa, are you still in our meeting? And Candace, Mr. Daza, everyone that's here today, thank you so much. Members, in terms of the committee resolutions, may I check with Wasim, were you able to jot down any of the points that the department stated that they will provide us the written information? Or should we give that back to you? I think you are on mute, Mr. Matthews.
Sorry, Chairperson. I would appreciate that the members resend it to me so that it can be accurately recorded. There are some that I picked up, and that was the request for a breakdown of the safety ambassadors in terms of specific demographics like gender, race, age, area of deployment, and the stipend allocation. There was also a request for the number of complaints and the steps taken to address the complaints for, I think it's regarding, I'm not quite sure what that request was for, whether it was what the nature of the complaints is. Yeah, I think it's best that the members send it in writing so that I can get accurately what the member describes, because sometimes I get requests from the department to clarify, and I'm unable to clarify immediately because the question wasn't given to me in the written form. So just to double check that, I'd appreciate members email it to me.
Thank you so much, Mr. Matthews. I will also indicate the acknowledgement that we will receive a monthly report on activities conducted by the LEAP officers, so that we are able to get those stats and deployment areas on a regular basis and provide either feedback, input to the department. Members, can I ask that we do that by Friday? Where are we today? Can I ask that we do that by Thursday before close of business? Would that be in order with everyone? Is that okay with you, Wasim? Thursday
Chair.
before Member Botha?
Chair, in regard to your timeline, it's quite a hectic week this week. May I request of you for rather close of business Friday, asseblief?
Sekerlik. Sekerlik. We can do it for Friday. I trust that that is in order, Wasim, and that will be fine your side, Wasim.
In order, Chairperson.
Thank you so much. On that note, we are done. Members, I really mean it when I say that it feels like it's May and April. 'n Spesiale bedanking vir Member Kama. Hy het hom gerestrained. Thank you so much, Member Kama. Member Christians, Member Bosman, Member Philander, Midway had to leave due to an emergency, but all the officials that are here, thank you so much, Member Bosman. Your attendance is highly appreciated, and we will, as a committee, we will obviously continue with our engagement moving forward and establishing our dates and having a draft committee report soon. Member Bosman.
Oh, Chairperson, are you able to hear me?
We can hear you now. Yes.
Thank you. Sorry for that, Chair. I just wanted to ask whether we've received any feedback from the South African Police Service on how into the forensic lab and the questions that we submitted. Do we have a status update on that?
Thank you so much, Member Bosman. I think what I've heard was that you wanted to check if we have received any feedback from the South African Police Service in terms of the DNA, our initial visit. I have in my calendar a bi-weekly check-in. So I have communicated with a certain Captain Stein as well as with the PC's office. And to date, we have received no feedback. My feedback constituted from November and December. And the first one was the 15th of January again. I am due to submit another follow-up, but I've also asked I've also asked the Deputy Commissioner to also look into why we have not received a reply in that regard. I will actually today again follow up and definitely keep members up to date in that regard. Would that be in order, Member Bosman?
There's an order for it. Can I also then perhaps ask Chair that we schedule a meeting with SAPS to perhaps ask these questions and also for them to give us an update on how they are going to now implement the amendments to the Criminal Procedure Act that says that all offences will now, people who are processed for offences up to a certain schedule will now have to have their DNA taken. And then also if we can get a presentation from them on the changes that were made yesterday with regards to the online protectors members of the public can now apply for.
Thank you so much, Member Bosman. Yes, I'll be in contact with you directly in that regard as well, but that should be possible. And we are potentially seeing each other face-to-face again at our visit week, which is commencing next week. But thank you so much, members. And I understand that we are all busy and active. May it go well with you during the course of today. But once again, thank you so much for your attendance here today. Wasim, baie dankie en almal. This meeting is now adjourned.
Bye-bye, Chair.